What's up, everybody? My name is Jasmine, otherwise known as Veracity, and I'm currently joined here by Donya Abramo, the community manager over at Unknown Worlds. Firstly, Donya, obviously Moonbreaker has been a huge hit so far. Tell me a little bit about the design process and how the process as a whole kind of felt for the entire team.
It's actually, the whole team is like a huge tabletop enthusiast studio. We all feel really passionately about miniatures and tabletop games, and we really wanted to bring it to more people. Sometimes tabletop as a genre can be maybe sometimes a little inaccessible to get into. We really wanted to share our passion and get more people into it. So that's kind of where our love of Moonbreaker kind of came through. We really wanted to just bring it to more people.
Okay. And obviously, Moonbreaker is significantly different to the Subnautica game that you guys are just a little bit. What kind of prompted that decision? Was it because everybody was such a big tabletop kind of fan?
So the interesting thing is actually Moonbreaker was developed alongside Below Zero. So those development processes were happening the same time. We have two teams working at the studio. So one is the Subnautica team and one is the Moonbreaker team. And so, yeah, really it was a passion project about tabletop and miniatures and that entire kind of aesthetic, which is where it was all born out of. But it is a huge shift. We know that. There are little threads, though, I think, that kind of connect the two together. If you really like the lore and the way that we do story in Subnautica, there are some similarities, I think, with the way that it works in Moonbreaker, where you kind of have to piece things together. We don't show you everything up front. So it will expand, it will kind of improve over time. So there's a little bit of similarities that may be more surprising to people than they might think.
Well, I know a lot of the folks were certainly surprised with the release of Moonbreaker. Was it kind of difficult to keep it under wraps?
I have wanted to talk about this game for so long. It's just been so nice to finally get it out there into the world, talk to people everywhere and just tell them about it and show them what we've been working on. I've been playing this game myself for 3 years. I want more people to play against. Yeah.
Okay, so how long has it actually been in development for?
Roughly 5 years, I would say. So
you kept us in the dark for 5 years, by the way.
Yeah, we kept you in the dark for 5 years. This may actually be the most polished game we're putting into early access ever.
As you've done that as well, I've just realized your nails are very on brand as well. I gotta say, I absolutely adore them. There we go, show it to the camera. Now, on the topic of kind of the sci-fi, spacey kind of theme, talk to me a little bit about the universe in which Moonbreaker is set in.
Yeah, so it's going to be set in this tiny little solar system called the Reaches, and they are made up of hundreds of little moons in orbit around a sun, and they're held in place with a resource called Cinder. The Cinder's kind of the center of our entire universe. There is a power source. So when you're in the game itself, it's what you would use to pay to deploy your crew or use special abilities. But in terms of the lore itself, it's what powers everything. It's what, makes the Reaches work.
So you guys also have been in very close contact. Brandon Sanderson, the New York Times best-selling author, has been integral to the development of Moonbreaker. Talk to me about, kind of the level of involvement that he ultimately had.
He basically very closely with us, we co-crafted the entire world. So everything that you see in terms of the setting, the characters, their personalities, the trajectory of their story, Brandon, the lore itself that he kind of wrote down for us to use to bring into the game and go beyond all of that, that was all from him. We worked really closely with him. It's been an incredible partnership. I'm glad we can also finally talk about that, because you think just keeping the game was a secret, keeping that a secret was even more difficult, especially someone who's a huge Brandon Sanderson fan as well. So being able to work within something that's kind of also part his universe is huge.
So how did that kind of process end up ultimately looking? Did he kind of hand over a book explaining the story or the universe of Moonbreaker, or was it more like a kind of creative storyboard? What did that kind of look like?
There is a document. If anyone knows Brandon Sanderson, he's a very prolific writer. He just writes and writes and writes. There is a document that we can pull from, and it covers a lot. beyond what we're even getting into the game for just the initial part of early access. So you're getting like maybe the tiniest sliver of what he's done when we go into early access.
So we're only reaching the tip of the iceberg when it comes to early access. There's still so much to come. And I've been picking your brains about the general gist of Moonbreaker, but I think it's about time you tell me, what is your favorite feature or mechanic of Moonbreaker?
The painting. I have spent so many hours painting in this game. I am, hands up, not the best miniatures painter. We've, in the game itself, like, to get the default paint job, so every single unit and captain has a default paint job. They were designed by actual miniatures painters. So we contracted actual miniatures painters to paint the units in game. And the really cool thing is they used only the tool in the game. There is no outside help. There's no Photoshop. There's no tricks, no nothing. Everything that is achieved in those default paint jobs was achieved using the tool in the game.
I think that's certainly impressive. That's definitely one of my favorite features as well, the different finishes and things like that. But we'll dive into that a little bit later on. I need you to tell me, though, as a newbie to, kind of the strategy game, tabletop games, and all things Moonbreaker, how does it really break it down for the beginner-style players?
So we do have what's known as quick start mode. It's kind of like a little mini tutorial. It'll show you how to, move your characters, how to execute just your standard attacks, your special abilities as a captain, and also some surprising ways that you can use combos. There are some characters and crew in the game where it looks like maybe their ability, you can only use it against an enemy unit, but you can also use it in really cool ways to build strategies to kind of use on your friendly units and your crew. So for example, there is a crew member who has a grappling hook. You can use it to bring an enemy closer to attack them, or you can use it to give yourself more movement as an ally crew to move them further across the board.
I found myself I was using them against enemies to begin with, but then I was like, hold on a minute, I've played the tutorial. I know I can use this on my friendlies as well. And honestly, I got to say, it's amazing stuff. How many units do we ultimately going to start things off with in early access?
So we're going to start with 3 captains initially, and I think there's between crew members and ship assists, there's around 50 units altogether.
And what's the difference between the captains, the ship assists, and the different units?
So captains are your hero characters. They kind of are at the top of your crew. They basically lead the charge into battle. The crewmates are basically who you've recruited to be in your little crew. And your ship assists, the idea of the game is when you deploy into our maps to start these little skirmishes, your ship is in orbit, right above the map. And essentially what happens is they can give you little assists as you're going through. They charge up over a certain number of turns and they help you out.
And you mentioned the captains. We start things off with 3 of our captains. What's the difference between all of them?
So we have a melee unit, which is Extilia. So he gets in really close. He's really bulky. He's a giant robot with a sword arm. So he does some spinning attacks. He's very powerful, a little slower than our other captains, but still pretty versatile, pretty cool to use. We've got Astra, who is a 12-year-old girl riding a giant frog. She is more about cost reducing the units and getting them into play faster. So she's got more support in terms of how she plays out. You tend to play her more defensively and further back. And then we've got Zax, who is our hologram captain because he managed to get himself killed. He's also ranged, so he's got a gun, and he uses mines, and he kind of has also a little gravity weapon to pull the mines and pull people together. So yeah, that's how they kind of differ. Depends on the kind of strategy that you like to play.
And you mentioned that Extilia was quite a slow character. How important is the speed really in a game of Moonbreaker?
It can change depending on the map that you're playing on. So some maps have more cover and more obstacles to move around. Extilia is one of those characters that you want to get him in really close as quickly as possible to really start attacking and getting things done. But I wouldn't say speed is essential in the game. It just changes up how you think about strategy.
And another cool addition that you guys have made into the game is the difference in cultures. And myself personally, I kind of view it as maybe people showing off their true personality traits. So tell me a little bit about the different cultures.
So we have 3 that will be shipping with early access on the 29th of September. One is the Smugglers. They're kind of like your ragtag group of like rogues and thieves, and they're kind of like a mishmash of, you know, machines, creatures, people. Like, they're kind of all over the place. Then we've got the Methodori. I've kind of been explaining them as almost like space Romans. They're like... They move through our universe, which is called the Reaches, protecting it. And they protect people whether they want that protection or not. So they have a very strong sense of like justice and doing like what's right by their code of conduct, like kind of thing. And then we've also got the Cholek. The Cholek are more spiritual, more naturally based, but they also are the tech leaders of the Reaches. So they're kind of like this really cool mixture of like nature and technology. So yeah, they're really cool.
And what is your favorite culture out of the ones that you've mentioned?
Oh, I really love the Smugglers, honestly. Who doesn't love a ragtag group of like found family kind of like coming together people? Like, there's something kind of charming about that.
And I've also quizzed you on the different units as well. So I think you need to tell me, who's your favorite unit?
Astra. I love Astra.
Why is the real question.
Astra is kind of like this really fun character, like even just in her movements, which is kind of what drew me to her initially. Like, she's got a giant frog and she hops around on it. She's really funny and cute and like really active. And I also love the way that she plays in terms of a captain. Like, she's by far my favorite to use strategy-wise for the style that I like to play in. And I used her so much in like our pre-early access playing with like our beta tester group that they started calling me Frog Girl.
And I believe you're now known as Frog Girl, like on the Discord and everything now, right?
Yeah, so if you come into our Discord and you see me in there, I have a little frog emoji next to my name. So little inside tip there for why I've got a frog emoji in my name.
I absolutely love it. Now, obviously, Moonbreaker is known as a tabletop strategy game, but how strategic is it really? What kind of different elements are there to being able to secure yourself a victory?
There's a lot. There are probably a lot more combos in this game that people might not initially realize. A lot of it's going to come into, like, once you learn what all the different units do. We probably know that there's going to be some combos between crew units and captains that we haven't even found yet, and we're really excited to find out like how people use them. In terms of strategy though, it's like everything can like turn really quickly with Moonbreaker. Like, there's so much about it that like when you initially get your crew in, they pull from a random pool of 10 at the start of the match, so you don't know who you're going to get initially from like the ones that you've put in your roster from the one that you've built. So it can change from game to game, and you've got to really think when you're putting your rosters together about like the order you might get your units in, because it can change every single game.
See, one thing that completely threw me throughout the duration of me playing is the cover that surrounded around the map. It was driving me absolutely nuts. I feel like I have to think like 10 steps ahead. How does each map that you guys end up releasing really end up kind of impacting the overall gameplay? Do you have different levels of cover on different maps?
We do. There are hardcover, which are like our big props that you cannot move or shoot through or attack through. We have soft cover, which you can't move through, but you can attack through if you've got a ranged unit, and that reduces accuracy. We have one map that has another type of cover called impassable, so you can't move through it, but you can attack across it, and it doesn't affect accuracy. And then on another map, we have like vents that have steam coming out of them, and you can pass freely through those, but if you try and shoot with a ranged character through it, it reduces your accuracy because you can't see through it.
Okay. I feel like you guys have definitely considered and thought of everything. And obviously another notion that a lot of gamers will be familiar with is this notion of pay to win. Talk to me a little bit about how Moonbreaker is different from all the other pay to win games.
We don't believe in pay to win. For a start, like, we have been really intentional and thoughtful about like how we've put the game together. we don't want anyone to get an advantage over anyone else in terms of like how you get your units and your crew and you put them together. We've tried to even the playing field as much as we possibly can as well, which is why we have randomized chip assists when you start the game that you choose from. It's why we also have the randomized order that your crew come in. It's kind of like mixing it up to make it fairer for everyone, so no one has a massive competitive advantage over anyone else. You kind of just have to learn to play the game, and that's kind of how we feel about it. But in terms of like just how the game works in terms of business model, like we're going to allow the community to guide us a little bit on that as well. When we launch into early access, it is a paid early access, so you pay for the game. It's $29.99, but it'll change depending on region, and you'll get a load of stuff with that. And then in terms of like how everything else works after that point, we'll let the community let us know through early access.
Okay, so how do you end up kind of unlocking new captains and new crew members along the way?
So you will start with a captain and 10 crewmates to just start with. They'll be automatically unlocked when you get into the early access version of the game. After that, they're kind of like called booster boxes, but basically you get them using in-game currency that you earn in-game. So you play the game, you play your matches, you earn it, and you just unlock these boxes and they give you more crew. It's not very difficult to get them. It's fairly straightforward. It doesn't take a super long time to get hold of them all, and especially when we move into early access, that's really important for us so that people can like play with as many of them as possible.
And obviously I've heard about the notion of the mastery that you end up unlocking on all of these different units. Talk to me a little bit more about how that kind of impacts the game or the experience you have overall.
Yeah, so the mastery of stuff is very much based on like how much you are using either a captain or a crewmate, and the more you use it, the higher that goes up. The more it goes up, the better you are. Like you can deploy a unit and someone will see your ranking on like that specific unit is really high, and that person you're playing against will be like, oh, this person really knows how to use Aria, for example, one of our crew members. So there's a lot of that comes into it, and also like the more you kind of use them, the higher your mastery is. So you don't always have to win a full match using that crew unit. You can kind of like lose it during the course of a match, but if it like was really impactful during that match, you will get like experience for playing that character.
And obviously you mentioned that the team are a huge fan of the game, rightly so. How has it kind of ended up looking for the team in the office? Has everybody been kind of playing some games against one another?
So the fun thing is that we're all actually fully remote. There is no office for Unknown Worlds, so everyone is based around the world. And what's really cool about that is that it actually brings us together a little bit, because we can like sit in Discord or sit in anywhere else and like play against each other, just start up a match and start playing. We have been getting together to do sessions every Friday where we just all play against each other, and that's been like really important for us.
And who's been the best player so far?
Oh God. If you ask Scott or anyone else, he would probably say that I'm pretty high up there. Strategy games are usually not my thing. I don't tend to play a lot of them. I'm more of like an MMO person, or like casual cozy games are like my vibe. I got obsessed with Moonbreaker very, very quickly, and I kind of got into it and got into like the strategy and building my crew and playing like so much. And so I'm like super into the game, like more than probably I think anyone expected me to be.
Donya, I know everybody is thinking what I'm thinking. How can we get our hands on some early access?
So at the moment, you can sign up for our playtest weekend. So basically they will be coming up at some point before we get into early access. But otherwise, just go on to Steam, wishlist the game. We come out on early access on the 29th of September. So basically just let us know that you want the game and you'll get notified as soon as it's available.
And are there any added benefits for people signing up to early access and things like that once they manage to get the game?
So before we launch into early access, you'll be able to sign up using Craft an ID, and that will give you an additional paint job that our miniatures painters did for Crankbait, one of our characters. So that's a really cool thing if you sign up to all of that earlier. So before we release into early access. In terms of early access itself, the actual paid package that we have for you to like get in and get playing in early access gives you a ton of stuff in the game, like loads of like credits and like being able to like get your different crew, like all of that stuff. But also I think the most important thing is you're going to be involved in the development process with us. Early access is a huge thing for us, the way you just kind of move through it with us and let us know what maybe we might need to think about a little bit more, or does something need to be tweaked or changed, and then we can take it back and like really think about what the community wants and how this game will look when we move into full release.
And I feel like that's what your team is ultimately infamous for. People love the fact that the devs actually listen to their feedback and their suggestions and things like that. So let the folks at home know how they can get involved. Is there any specific place we might be able to provide some feedback?
Yeah, we're going to be on all social media, so we'll be everywhere from like Twitter, Facebook, Reddit, you name it, we're probably there. But at the center of our community, our whole universe is going to be Discord. We've set it up. You can come and join us there, give us feedback, share things that you're doing while you're playing. And the devs are in there. We're like talking and chatting to people. We're there all the time. So come and join us and let us know what you think.
Well, I'll definitely be sharing my own miniature artwork over in the Moonbreaker universe over on the Discord, so make sure you folks check it out as well. Thank you very much for chatting with me.
That's absolutely fine. Thank you for having me.